Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you're somewhere comfortable right now. Maybe dim the lights a little bit.
Yeah, definitely set the mood for this one.
Right, because we are shifting gears today. Usually we're looking at, the latest tech trends or trying to hack our productivity. But tonight we're doing something totally different. We are stepping into the weird, the philosophical, and honestly slightly chilling.
It is a completely different vibe today. It feels, I don't know, it feels a bit like a ghost story, a bit like a high-stakes soap opera, and then a bit like a graduate-level philosophy seminar all rolled into one.
Exactly.
And frankly, considering the source material we're looking at, that mix is pretty much par for the course.
It really is. We are looking at a very specific document today. It's a transcript recorded on December 20th, 1967. This is session 388 from the early sessions, book 8 of the Seth material.
Yes.
Now, for the uninitiated, that name Seth might ring a bell, or it might just sound like your accountant, but in the world of metaphysics, it's the bedrock.
It really is the foundational text for modern channeling. And just to set the stage for anyone who hasn't encountered this before, this material is published by the New Awareness Network.
Right.
The premise is just fascinating, regardless of where you stand on the metaphysical spectrum. You have Jane Roberts, a writer in Elmira, New York, who enters a trance state and speaks for an entity calling himself Seth.
And before we go any further into the spooky stuff or the deep philosophy, I want to make sure we say this right up front. This deep dive is being distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Absolutely.
We are just here to explore the ideas in the text. We aren't selling a religion. We aren't telling you what to believe. We are literally just unpacking a really fascinating case study.
And the ideas in this specific session are heavy. I mean, we aren't talking about the nature of the universe in some abstract, distant sense. We are talking about a very specific, very human tragedy.
It's grounded in real pain.
Exactly. This isn't theoretical physics. It's about pain, love, and the choices we make before we're even born, allegedly.
Okay, so it starts with a phone call. It's a Wednesday night in 1967. Jane gets a call from a man named John Pitre. And John is, well, listen to the context of the session notes. The guy sounds absolutely desperate.
He is desperate. His wife, Peg, is suffering from multiple sclerosis.
And it's bad.
It's very bad. She's in the hospital. She's been struggling for a long time. She's tried various treatments, and she's even tried hypnotherapy, which Seth had actually recommended previously. But it's not working.
Right, she's resisting it.
Yeah, she's resisting the trance state. She's entirely stuck.
And so John calls Jane, hoping Seth can give some insight.
Mm.
And he asks the question that I think, honestly, every single human being has asked at some point when they see someone they love suffering. He asks, essentially, why is this happening? But because he follows the Seth material, he asks it in a very specific and, frankly, kind of confronting way.
Right. He doesn't just ask, why did she get sick, like it's a random lottery drawing. He asks, why has Peg chosen this role?
Yeah.
Why is she living a life that seems to be entirely without reward or hope?
Okay, stop there for a second, because the word chosen that is a loaded word.
Very.
If I'm a listener hearing this cold, or if I'm someone struggling with a chronic illness myself, that sounds incredibly harsh. It sounds like victim blaming. Like, oh, you have MS, you must have wanted it.
Yeah.
Is that really the premise we're working with here? Because that's a tough pill to swallow for anyone.
It is the immediate reaction most people have, and it's completely valid. It sounds cruel on the surface, but Seth's answer is surprisingly nuanced.
Okay, how so?
He isn't saying, Peg, the conscious woman lying in the hospital bed, wincing in pain, woke up and said, I'd like to suffer today.
Right.
He's talking about a choice made at a much deeper subconscious level by the entity or the soul, rather than the conscious personality.
So there's a hard distinction here between Peg the person and Peg the soul.
Exactly. And that distinction is the absolute key to the whole session. John wants to know why the soul would script such a brutal tragedy for the person.
Just like it's the difference between the actor playing Hamlet and Hamlet himself.
That's a great way to put it. The actor chooses to play the tragedy. The character just suffers through it without knowing why.
Okay, that makes it slightly more palatable, but it's still a really heavy concept. So let's unpack this. We have to start with the medical side of things, or at least the Seth medical side of things.
Right.
Jane goes into the trance.
Quiet voice, long pauses, her eyes checking open and shut, the usual procedure for her sessions, and then Seth comes through.
And Seth starts diagnosing Peg. But he doesn't talk about viruses or genetics or myelin sheaths breaking down. He talks about electricity.
He does, and this is really key to understanding the Seth worldview on illness in general. He says, quote, "Now we have strong electrical brain discharges in disorganized patterns."
Electrical discharges, that sounds, I don't know, volatile, like a literal storm inside her head.
It is volatile. He's describing the physical manifestation of the illness as an energy problem. He says, and this is a direct quote we need to look at, "Emotions are electrical, magnetic realities. Sufficient enough repression here has caused these rampant electric brain discharges that automatically affect the motor systems."
Wait, hold on a second. Emotions are electrical realities.
Yeah.
I feel like we often treat emotions as these abstract, fluffy clouds in our heads. Just feelings?
Yeah.
But Seth is saying they are literal physics.
Essentially, yes. The argument here is that the mind and the body aren't two different isolated things. Seth is saying, no, emotion is energy. It has a real charge to it.
Wow.
And here is the kicker. Physics tells us energy cannot be destroyed, right? It has to go somewhere.
So if you don't express it, it turns inward.
Precisely. If you have a massive amount of emotional energy, fear, anger, deep resentment, and you don't express it, if you just repress it over and over,
it builds up.
that charge builds up. It becomes static, and eventually it discharges. In Peg's case, it's manifesting as these disorganized discharges that are physically disrupting her motor control.
So her body is physically reacting to a psychological dam breaking.
Exactly. Seth says deep within, there is no peace upon which stability is based, hence the constant erratic disorders.
That is a terrifying thought. That you could be so bottled up emotionally that you physically short-circuit yourself.
It's a stark way of looking at mind-body connection.
But Seth also mentions the hypnosis earlier. She was trying to get better, right? Why was she resisting the treatment if she was in so much pain?
This is one of the most insightful parts of the session regarding human psychology. Seth notes that she has suffered relapses rather than suffer the intense psychic and psychological reorganization that would be necessary for any meaningful recovery.
Intense psychic and psychological reorganization? That sounds like a massive, heavy lift.
It's the heaviest lift imaginable. Think about it. We often identify deeply with our problems.
Oh, absolutely.
Our coping mechanisms, even the really bad ones, become a part of who we are. Our illness becomes our identity. Seth is suggesting that for Peg to get better physically, she would have to fundamentally dismantle who she is psychologically. She would have to stop repressing. She would have to actually face whatever it is she's hiding from.
And that is scarier to her than the MS.
To the subconscious mind. Often, yes. The known suffering feels safer than the completely unknown change.
It's the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Exactly. We see this in conventional therapy all the time. People come in wanting to be fixed, but the moment you get close to the actual root cause, the defense mechanisms just flare up to protect the ego.
And in Peg's case, the defense mechanism is the illness itself.
It's self-preservation gone horribly wrong.
So she's caught in this awful double bind. The cure requires a total personality overhaul, which is too terrifying, so her subconscious retreats back into the sickness.
Right.
It's tragic logic, but it is logic.
It makes sense from a purely defensive standpoint.
Okay, so that's the mechanism. That's the how of the illness. But John didn't just ask how, he asked why. Why this struggle? Why this specific kind of suffering for Peg?
And this is where we have to talk about the K word, karma.
Right. Now, in the West, especially back in the 60s when this was recorded, and honestly still a lot today, we tend to view karma as this cosmic reward and punishment system.
Yeah, very transactional.
Exactly. You steal a loaf of bread, you lose your wallet. You kick a puppy, you stub your toe.
Crime and punishment.
Right. An eye for an eye, a cosmic judge keeping score up in the clouds.
Seth throws that entire concept out the window immediately. He says flat out, the basic idea of karma is not punishment.
So if it's not punishment, what is it? Because look, Peg is definitely suffering in that hospital bed. It really feels like a punishment.
He defines it as opportunity. He says, quote, karma presents the opportunity for development, to make use of opportunities that were not taken advantage of, to fill in gaps of ignorance, to enlarge understanding through experience.
I really like that phrasing, to fill in gaps of ignorance. It makes it sound educational.
Yeah.
Like, you failed a math test, so you have to take a remedial class. It's not because the teacher hates you or wants to punish you. It's because you literally need to know algebra to graduate.
Exactly. It's a crash course.
Yeah.
And he emphasizes that free will is always involved. You aren't sentenced to a life of suffering by a judge.
Okay.
You, meaning your greater self, your entity in Seth's terms, choose the curriculum. You sign up for the class because you want the knowledge.
It's like signing up for an intense boot camp. You know it's going to hurt. You know you're going to want to quit halfway through, but you do it because you want the specific result at the end.
Yes, the purpose is knowledge, not self-flagellation.
But man, this is a brutal class Peg signed up for.
Yeah.
MS is not a joke. Why would anyone choose that specific, painful curriculum? What could she possibly need to learn that requires her to be completely bedridden?
To answer that, Seth takes us on a trip. And this is where the episode turns into that Italian soap opera vibe we mentioned in the intro.
Right, the atmosphere in the room must have changed completely here.
Definitely. Seth starts describing a past life. And he gets very specific. He doesn't just say, once upon a time in a faraway land.
No, he transports us back to a hill village in Italy.
Right. We don't have an exact date yet, but based on the context clues we get later, like a train wreck and the timeline of subsequent lives, we're looking at maybe the late 19th or early 20th century.
And he introduces us to the main character of this past life, a man named Niccolo.
Niccolo Vanguardi. Seth gives a phonetic interpretation of the name. Now, I want you to visualize this. A rural Italian village. Stone houses. Very hard manual labor. Niccolo is a widower.
Okay.
He's living in this small village, working a small farm. But he's not alone. He has a daughter.
Rosalina.
Rosalina. And Rosalina is described by Seth as highly neurotic and completely crippled.
Okay, so here is the setup. You have a father, Niccolo, taking care of an invalid daughter, Rosalina.
Yeah.
That sounds, I don't know, noble, like a dedicated, sacrificing father.
On the surface, maybe, it looks that way to the neighbors, but Seth peels back the layers. He looks at the actual emotion behind the action.
The electrical charge of it.
Exactly. He says Niccolo resented the girl, and while he cared for her, he did not do so kindly.
Oof. So he's doing the duty, but he's hating every single minute of it. He's grudgingly bringing her soup, probably slamming the bowl down on the table.
He felt entirely trapped. Seth explains that Niccolo wanted to remarry. He was a man with needs. He wanted a real life, but no one would have him because of his daughter.
Right.
In a small village back then, a crippled, neurotic stepchild is a lot of baggage for a new wife to take on. He saw Rosalina as the anchor dragging him down, preventing him from finding any personal happiness.
That is just a recipe for deep bitterness.
Deep, rotting bitterness. And Rosalina knew it. The dynamic was incredibly toxic. Seth says the girl, when she could, defied him.
Wow.
She was crippled, but she wasn't deformed. She was actually described as handsome-looking. At age 33, she looked much younger than the other women in the village who had been worn out working in the sun in the fields.
Oh, that's an interesting detail.
Right. So she sat there, beautiful but immobile, constantly defying her father, who secretly just wished she wasn't there.
So she's beautiful, she's difficult, she's totally dependent, and they are stuck in this awful, toxic, resentful deadlock. It feels like a pressure cooker waiting to explode.
It was. Until the stranger comes to town.
Cue the dramatic music. The plot twist arrives.
Enter a widowed man from a nearby village. He has no children of his own. He comes to help on Niccolo's farm as itinerant help, and against all odds,
He falls in love with Rosalina.
he falls in love with the crippled daughter, and despite her condition, he decides to take her away. He takes her to his home village to be his wife.
Now, if this were a Hollywood movie, this is the happy ending.
Right.
The father is relieved of his terrible burden. The daughter gets love and escapes. The suitor gets a beautiful wife. Everyone wins. The credits roll.
But this isn't Hollywood. This is raw human psychology, and it's messy. How do you think Niccolo reacts? Is he happy? Is he relieved?
Knowing Niccolo from what you've just said, I'm guessing no. He's furious.
Seth says the father was thoroughly embittered. Instead of being happy for her, he felt abandoned. He railed that she had forsaken him in his old age after he had cared for her through the long years.
Wow, that is twisted. So he spent years complaining that she was a huge burden, but the literal moment someone took that burden away, he played the victim.
Exactly. How could you leave me after all I did for you?
It's that twisted possessiveness.
Yeah.
He didn't love her, but he owned her.
Yes.
He had built his entire identity around being the long-suffering martyr father. Without her, he was just a lonely, mean old man.
And Seth says he died hating his daughter the more and hating the man who took her away.
What a tragic, miserable way to end a life. To die consumed by hate for the people who actually solved your biggest problem.
And that brings us right back to 1967. Because those three people, Niccolo, Rosalina, and the suitor, didn't just disappear into the ether. They are back.
Let's map this out because this is the mind-bending part of the whole session, the role reversal. This is the how of the current hospital situation.
Right. So let's look at the players in the hospital room scenario in 1967. First, we have Peg, The wife with severe MS, the invalid. Who was she?
She was Niccolo.
She was Niccolo. She was the bitter father.
Okay, so the person who resented the cripple has literally become the cripple.
Precisely. The tables have turned completely. Next, we have John, the husband who called Jane in a panic. The man who is now caring for Pold. Who was he?
He was the suitor, the man who came and took Rosalina away.
Yes, the man Niccolo hated.
So Peg is being cared for by the soul of the man she used to hate.
Exactly. And just as a fascinating side note here, Seth mentions that Rosalina, the original crippled daughter, is actually Peg's current mother.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So the whole family clusters back together playing different parts. But let's stick to Peg and John for a second, though. Is it poetic justice? No, wait. We already said it's not punishment, but it feels incredibly ironic.
It's not punishment, it's immersion.
Immersion.
Think about Niccolo's mindset in the past. He couldn't understand Rosalina. Seth says he could not and would not, out of fear, try to understand the circumstances and position of the crippled daughter. Not for a moment could he then bear to contemplate the inner reality in personal terms.
He lacked any empathy whatsoever.
Yeah.
He literally couldn't imagine what it was like to be helpless.
So his entity, his soul, said, okay, you can't understand this from the outside, you refuse to see it, then you need to understand it from the inside.
Right.
In this life, as Peg, she has chosen to be completely immersed in that dependency. She has to learn to be the one who is cared for. She has to learn to accept help without bitterness.
That is intense, to choose a life of MS just to understand vulnerability.
It's a radical method of learning. But look at John's side of the equation, too. Why is he there? In the past life, as a suitor, he was impetuous. He swooped in, saved the girl, rode off into the sunset. It was romantic, but maybe a bit impulsive.
Yeah, he just fixed the problem and left.
Now, he can't just swoop in and fix it. MS doesn't have a quick fix. He can't ride off into the sunset. He has to learn deep patience. He has to learn contemplation.
And he has to care for the person, Peg, who was Niccolo,
Right.
who used to actively hate him.
Right. And Peg has to learn to deeply love and depend on the man she used to hate. Seth says, John's wife loves him and has been made subconsciously to see the good points in his personality. In the past, he hated the man who took away the daughter.
So they are balancing the scales.
They are working out the kinks in their relationship that started centuries ago.
It's like they're forced to look at each other from the exact opposite angle. I was the caretaker, now I am the patient. You are the rescuer, now you are the long-term nurse.
That's the real aha moment of this text. Suffering isn't random. In this view, it's a strategic maneuver by the soul. It's a way to resolve a family argument that has spanned across centuries.
It's an extreme form of couples therapy.
Very extreme.
But I have to ask, MS is brutal. It's not just quote-unquote being dependent. It's intense physical pain. It's loss of bodily function. It's a slow, grinding decline. Why choose something so severe? Couldn't she have just, I don't know, broken a leg or had a milder condition to learn about dependency? Why the nuclear option?
This is where we get into the concept of telescoping. And this is fascinating for anyone interested in how spiritual growth might actually work in this framework. Seth calls Peg an impatient entity.
Impatient. That seems entirely contradictory for someone who is bedridden.
Spiritual impatience. Apparently, this personality didn't want to spend 10 different lifetimes learning humility and patience in small, manageable doses. She wanted to get it all done right now.
She's cramming.
Exactly.
She's pulling a spiritual all-nighter for her soul.
That's exactly it. It's the all-in-one strategy. Seth says all of the weak points were intensified, hence the gravity of the physical condition. The entity preferred this rather than a series of smaller difficulties.
So instead of 5 lives with a bad knee, and then a life with a difficult boss, and then a life with financial dependency, she takes one life with severe MS and deals with all of those themes at once.
Right. And John agreed to it before they were born. Seth says, John acquiesced to learn patience and forbearing, to take what he considered his medicine in one dose, so to speak.
Taking his medicine in one dose. That's a tough pill to swallow. But I guess if you view time as infinite from the soul's perspective, getting it over with quickly has an appeal.
It does. But Seth calls it bold and courageous. He says, only a bold personality would attempt this. It's high risk, high reward. And because of this intensity, because she's facing everything at once, Seth drops a huge bombshell about Peg's future.
What's that?
He says this is Peg's last physical reincarnation.
Her last one. Like, she's completely done with Earth after this. No more coming back.
That's what he says. The personality will then have experience in other than earthly existences. She is graduating. This traumatic, painful life is her final exam.
Wow. That changes the perspective completely. If you knew that this incredible struggle was the final hurdle before, I don't know, moving on to a higher plane of existence, it gives the suffering a real purpose. It's not just life is hard and then you die. This is the final sprint.
That's the core message. It reframes the suffering from meaningless random tragedy to a climactic chosen challenge.
But does that mean she has to die in that hospital bed? If she's telescoping and this is the end, is she doomed? Is the script already completely written?
This is the critical point about free will in the Seth material. Seth is very clear on this. There is no predestination.
None.
None. He says complete recovery, illness, or early death, for example, are not preordained. The problem is a challenge set up by the entity, but the outcome is left up to the individual.
So the entity sets the stage,
Yeah.
builds the set, writes the scenario, casts the characters, but Peg, the conscious actor, decides how the scene actually ends.
Yes. She could choose to recover. Remember the psychic reorganization we talked about at the beginning?
Dismantling her defense mechanisms.
If she stops resisting, if she accepts the internal psychological change, she could physically heal. Or she could decide she's learned enough, she's tired, and she checks out early. Seth admits, quote, "The answer now is uncertain. Even he doesn't know because Peg hasn't decided subconsciously yet."
That is wild to me. Even the all-knowing spirit guide is basically watching the movie in real time with us, waiting to see what the character decides to do. It really puts the ultimate responsibility back on us.
It empowers the individual completely. You are never just a helpless victim of your script. You are improvising the ending every single day. And Seth mentions something really beautiful about how she copes with this heavy burden in the meantime. He talks about her dreams.
Oh, right. The dream state. I love this part of the material.
He says that deep within, she finds release in dreams where she relives past successes. He mentions a later life, or perhaps a parallel one. Time is very tricky in the Seth cosmology, where she was a wealthy Italian woman driving through the land near that old farm where she was Niccolo.
Ah, full circle.
In her dreams, she is powerful, healthy, and successful. Seth says, these experiences reassure the whole personality of its complete nature. It knows it is more than the self that it has for a time chosen to be.
That is deeply comforting. The idea that when we sleep, we tap into a version of ourselves that isn't broken or struggling. That we remind ourselves, hey, I'm just playing a role right now. This illness, this struggle, this isn't all I am.
It reminds her that the MS isn't her. It's just a heavy costume she's wearing for the specific play, and knowing that subconsciously helps her endure the telescoping intensity of the pain.
Now, before we wrap up, we absolutely have to talk about the true crime aspect of this. Or maybe history detective is a better term. Because Seth doesn't just leave it at vague Italian hill village. He drops real breadcrumbs.
He loves doing this. It's like he's trying to prove to John and Jane, and by extension us, that this isn't just a metaphor. He's not just making up a fable to make them feel better about a tragic situation. He gives specific geographical details.
Right, he mentions the town name.
He says the name of the original town is something like Ventura, in the south of Italy. Southeast, though not sharply east.
And he mentions a train wreck, too, which seems really oddly specific.
Yes. He says an important train wreck occurred in this area just after the 1930s, and he mentions a Roman fort within 50 miles.
Why do you think he includes that granular stuff? I mean, it's a philosophy session.
It grounds the philosophy in reality. If you can go to a map and find a town like Ventura near a Roman fort where a train crashed in the 30s, suddenly the story about Niccolo and Rosalina feels a lot more real.
It bridges the gap between the spooky ghost story and verifiable history.
Exactly. It says these were real people, they walked the earth, and now they're walking it again as you.
It really has that chill factor we talked about at the top of the show. It makes you wonder, if we dug through Italian municipal records, would we find a Niccolo Vanguardi? Would we find a record of his bitter death?
We might. And that possibility changes everything. It validates the rest of the message. If the town is real, maybe the karma is real too.
So let's bring this all back to you, the listener. We've gone from a hospital room in 1967 to an Italian hill village and back again. We've talked about electrical emotions, role-reversing reincarnation, and telescoping trauma. What is the big takeaway here?
I think the big takeaway is about agency. It's so easy to feel like a victim of life, especially when things go wrong, illness, loss, massive failure. We look up at the sky and say, why me? Why is this happening?
Right.
Seth's perspective challenges us to completely flip that script. What if you aren't a victim? What if you are actually a student? What if the exact things you are struggling with right now are the very things you came here to learn?
It's the ultimate reframing tool. It doesn't necessarily make the physical or emotional pain go away, but it gives it meaning. It turns suffering into a strategy for growth.
Exactly.
And it raises that provocative question for all of us. If we really do choose our challenges to learn what we previously ignored in other lives, what are you ignoring right now?
That's the question. What are you actively avoiding? What empathy are you refusing to feel for someone else? Who are you judging harshly right now? Because if Seth is right, you might just have to come back and experience their exact life firsthand in the next round. If you hate the weak, you might choose to become them to learn better.
Maybe better to deal with it now than to telescope it later, right?
Definitely. Take the medicine in small doses today if you can. Don't wait for the spiritual crash course.
If you want to dive deeper into this, and we barely scratch the surface of what Seth covers, the mechanics of consciousness are just endless. You really need to go directly to the source. We are talking about the Seth material.
Specifically, this session was from the Early Sessions, Book 8. But there are so many books. The Nature of Personal Reality, Seth speaks. You can find these books and a whole lot more at the New Awareness Network website.
That's sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
Highly recommend checking it out. It's dense, it's wild, and it might just fundamentally change how you look at your own reality.
That's it for this deep dive. Whether you are an old soul on your very last life or just getting started on your journey, thanks for listening.
See you in the next life.
Or maybe just the next episode. Good night, everyone.